Well, once again, here we enter just past the halfway point. No, not quite. This is the halfway turn. 1635. At the end of this turn, we'll be halfway through. All right. So, what do we got? Well, first thing I noticed was, damn it, last turn there was poor weather and I forgot about it now. So what, you know? I'll just ignore that fact, but you know, it's really easy to lose track of what's going on. Okay. We have two big things happen this term. Russia, though, had a dynastic crisis, looting and uncertainty, which put pirates up here. They're going to have a penalty to their cost. They got a new king who's going to be worse, or czar, who's going to be worse than before. They also had a revolt in Astrakhan, not really linked to that. It's a different event that got retaken. Turkey has an exceptional year that'll help them with a little bit extra money. But what else? Persia annexed Iraq. This is an event that happened, so this ate up a Persian war event. If Turkey beat Persia, they'd have been coming back again. Of course, it also gives them another territory to live, but it's definitely to Turkey's advantage, I think, other than maybe they want these free wars with Persia. If they don't have any distractions, they may actually be able to win some of these. Of course, they kind of want to go after the Mamluks. All right. We're holding off on the English Civil War. Let's take a look at the next one, which was jumping into the fifth period. We got Colbertian mercantilism. Now, France could just refuse this. If they wanted to keep Richelieu, they'd have to. But instead, they canned Richelieu, and this is the one reason I can think of doing this, and got a different excellent minister who's not quite as good and certainly doesn't give the advantages here, but he has a whole bunch of other advantages. Among them, it becomes an act of war to have merchants, I think, in the France CTC, maybe a monopoly there, but there's a tax, there's all kind of painful stuff to anyone who wishes to trade with the French. So now France becomes almost a closed economy. There are additional bonuses. Geez, I forgot. Forgetting everything because I had to read the English rules. But there's a significant number of additional advantages that accrue. Any commercial fleets they get a CTC against. Their DTI, FTI, and manufacturing limits have all gone up. It also allows them to build Versailles. I don't know if they have to do it now. But that's basically a place to sink some $300 into. That gives you 100 victory points, which is a pretty good payoff. If I'm correct, I may be mistaken with the rules, but I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head. I haven't looked them up yet. But anyway, it tends to be a valuable place, and France is doing well enough they can actually get away with it here in this early period. Normally they don't get it until the Louis XIV era. Okay, so now the next thing is, let's go to the English Civil War. First things first, it did not trigger a Scottish war because the personal union doesn't exist. You can see there's some pirates showing up in the English CTC. This is the territory that the Royalists ended up with. They're under the control of the French. There's an Irish revolt that's under the control of the Spaniards, and they're allowed to use one of their missionaries to help reduce the chances of the Irish being suppressed as revolters. They also have a little army, and they could actually become their own little country if you're not careful. So the parliamentarian English have to worry about maintaining Ireland, as they did, and they also have to worry about this equal-sized army currently under Rupert. The king is sort of sitting aside. The Royalists can use him at France's option. If he survives and the Royalists win, he becomes the king again, if he's not too old. If, on the other hand, the parliamentarian win, they get to put the Lord Protector into place. Now, Cromwell's actually attached to this event in the Risto rules. He'll be showing up next turn, and that's when he historically was supposed to show up, so it doesn't work out too badly there. They've done that with some of the events attaching a ruler. Now, what's complicated here is if the parliamentarians win, England's a republic. Now, that's possible in these rules, the Risto rules, to last forever. It may be the case that England remains a republic and does not revert to a monarchy. Essentially what happens is each time a Lord Protector dies, there's a roll, and if there's a dynastic crisis, well, then the royalists come in automatically. But for each Lord Protector there is, well, it's not automatic, right? Why would you roll then? You roll a die, adding 2 to the result if England's Catholic. If you get a 5 or more, there's a coup and the monarchy is restored. Now, there's a -1 for each turn that the republic lasts. Oh, and not for each Lord Protector that the republic lasts through. So as more and more Lord Protectors go away, there's less and less chance of it becoming a monarchy. But at first, there's a very high chance with England being Catholic at this point. Alright, it's possible to intervene in favor of the royalists or the parliamentarians. In this case, France has the option to send troops in. Now, France is very interested in this. They would like to humble England as much as possible. So they may well be sending a big stack of armies into England. The problem here right now is the English Navy is under the command of Parliament. Now, it can defect as well. There are unfortunately no counters for that. The French have a pretty meaty navy already, and they've got a bunch of leaders showing up now. And they can kind of intervene in this without risking their colonies or anything. They just send one stack to help. The colonial possessions all remain purely parliamentarian. Alright, I kind of glossed over a lot of that. There's a lot of specific rules. I don't want to go into them all, but essentially they're trying to wipe each other out. At this point, the royalists are very weak. They have 3 territories. If they lose one of those territories by the end of the turn, the royalists collapse. However, they get rolls for reinforcements, etc., and maybe some help from the French. We'll see. Well, diplomacy-wise, the big event, France did another one of these optional declarations of war. I generally don't like doing them, but France is kind of snowballing their territory. And they really feel like they're gaining something in each case. In this case, they went after Tuscany. Cost them 2 stability, which is really the big issue here, and 5 victory points, which they will easily gain back. On top of that, they had a lot of money, so they went after and obtained Scotland in Expeditionary Corps. Spain didn't have the money to protect it, so they lost it. There's a victory point swing in each direction there. And they also went for the Swiss, looking to protect themselves against the Habsburgs. And all they got was a military royal marriage from that. Switzerland cost double for the early levels, and it's kind of expensive for the later ones too. But it seems like a very powerful position for them, kind of sitting on the right on the Habsburg border, but in a defensible way. Another option, obviously, if they're looking just against the Habsburgs, would be something like Poland or Prussia that they could really, focus a lot of power with. See what happens, because if the Turks keep harassing them, the French are either going to have to decide to leave the Mediterranean and stop building up there, which might be their most reasonable choice, or try to build up a force to cope with the Turks, which could be something. Really, the only option available is Poland, and Poland's quite a powerful option to use for that. Anyway, on to the administrative crap. Well, that big hit that France took out of Spain's money, and they had to repay it if they possibly could. When I looked at the administrative phase, Spain went bankrupt. So So now no more manufacturers. Stability -3. For the most part, it wasn't too bad. Losing 2 manufacturers is painful, but that can be recovered. The trading fleets, they're going to need to get them back, but it does. It was not good, and it means no more loans for Spain for the rest of this period. And we're still fairly early in the period. Started back here. I don't know when it ends. Looks like it ends here. So there's a few turns left, and Spain really can't afford to get itself in a war without the ability to take loans. England and France have already done their purchases, and oh boy, are they wealthy at this point. England had $700 to spend. France had $750, including the Spanish money. On Spain's good side, though, they're upping their gold production here in Cusco. They've got this one they can build next turn. They've got to explore and find themselves Potosi. The reason they may not want to do that right away, even though it's very, very valuable, is they only have this one conquistador, and if they lose him, they don't get another one back. They don't have one fixed for the period. So they kind of want to make the most of what they can build right now, at least with the gold mines. Everything else, you know, it's not that big a deal if you're making a choice between expanding a territory or upping other colonies, especially since those other colonies are starting to produce goods. Sugar is actually at the break-even point, I think. Yeah, it's at the break-even point with the... Oh, no. That's the sugar price. Never mind. Yeah, it's got to get a cost up to 6, way up here, to be worth buying slaves at this point. Now, the Spanish have been doing it for both sugar and tobacco, and the English for tobacco. The Spanish getting the monopoly in sugar, and, well, the English in a way are trying to limit their economy. You can play with it a little bit by doing something like that and having control over how much money you're making. You can improve your chances of a prosperity increase. So you can artificially deflate your income by buying additional slaves and producing products that aren't necessarily in your best interest. Of course, there's only 5 slaves on the market, and Spain has been buying those. England's been using its own slaves, which also actually reduces the amount of slaves being sold. The problem with that is that increases the price of slaves. That's not so good for Spain, who has to rely on someone else. Now, Spain can grant asiento to someone, but that's worth a lot of victory points. And it's not terribly valuable for England because they have a use for their slaves. Portugal is a minor, and I don't think they're allowed to grant it to them while they're a minor. They're allowed to use those slaves for the Portuguese holdings when they're a combined country, if the Portuguese can make money by using them. So it kind of leaves France as the person who's developing a slave trading network, which might be worth the asiento. Now, nobody wants to give France more victory points, and that's what the asiento does. It allows you to sell slaves with sort of a monopoly in Spanish territory. Because Spain does end up needing more slaves than they can produce. Spain often gets into the slave trade just because they don't want to give the asiento, and they want to, stock up all their colonies so that they can produce the more valuable goods, especially as time goes on, they become more valuable. But that doesn't look like it's going to happen this game. Spain's not in great shape at all. Alright, well, we're about ready to kick off the military phases at this point. Royalists have built up quite an army, actually. They've got 2 full armies, kind of their max size, and a couple of detachments here. Still may not be enough, because if they lose one territory, they collapse. Which is why the French were planning on bringing an army up, but the French have their own problems, especially since they entered a war with Tuscany. Now, I want to bring one thing to note about the war with Tuscany. You might immediately say, well, why did Spain take them? Spain's going to be in control of them, and they're almost certainly a victory point sink. This is one of the problems with people declaring a lot of wars is, well, if you can't support, and you usually can't because they're over in the neutrals pile and you can't immediately declare a war when they're there, if you can't support your minor, and it's not anything big, you're going to lose maybe not 10 victory points, maybe not 5 even. Well, 10 would be half of an ultimate surrender. And you only take half victory points for minors that you control. So 5 would seem like it, but you also get points for every 2 rounds that they stay alive. So you might actually kind of break out even in it, or come close to breaking even if they completely are eliminated. But still, it seems like a disadvantage. The problem is, if you are the first person on the list, and Spain was in this case, and you deny them, you lose a point of stability. Everyone else then gets the same chance in order, and if they deny it, they also each lose a point of stability. But if it comes back around to you, you lose another point of stability, and you're stuck with them anyway. So it's pretty painful to ditch an ally. It might be worthwhile in the event that someone else is already at war with the person declaring war on them, because then they can operate together kind of, and they can help them, maybe. But usually someone's not declaring war on a minor, picking them off like that, when they're really involved in something else. Anyway, Persians got kind of their minimum, well, not quite their minimum, they got a full army. Their minimum is an army minus. So, and it's pretty hard not to get that as long as Persia has any sized territory left. Turkey's looking to get out of the war, but they're also looking at, hey, maybe I can get a territory off of Persia. That would be nice. They'd like to get a victory. Russia's still low on cash. Managed to build another colony. They're working their way. They got to make their way out to here before the era ends. That's not a hard task, but Russia's so strapped that basically their choices are advance in Siberia or try to prosecute a war. Siberia is the easier task and they're more interested in it, so they're going to go with that. But eventually they have to expand themselves. The other side, the Dutch, are also in a really, really poor position monetarily. They've got a loan that they're maintaining. It's not an expensive one, but they're not out fighting the piracy. And I think these pirates would be attacking here. I'm not really positive of how it all works. It's a lot easier on the rest of the world, but here, nothing can get there otherwise. So I think these are at risk. Somebody's got to clean that piracy up. It's not going to be a hard job. The English certainly have an interest in doing so. The Dutch have no navy. So they're, kind of trying to expand their trading posts and their colonies and taking additional shipping where they can, and they brought this up. This is shipping they've already paid for, just coming back. Anyway, we'll see how that all works out for them. French are avoiding the Mediterranean now. They've started spreading, I don't know where. I think they tried to go into North America and failed. Anyway, they're just looking at, well, if Turkey's going to fight us. Anyhow, we'll see how this works out. Alright, well, what exciting happened in this first round? Spain had no money, nobody there. French moving further into Africa, or up in Africa, grabbing more trading post areas, as it were. And you need a good die roll over there, which is why they need a conquistador as well. Continuing in their siege of La Rochelle, they've got a fleet in place. Got some anti-piracy action. The English landed over here in Ireland. They also made an attack on Rupert and were not exactly defeated, but repulsed with heavy losses, which puts things to looking very good on the royalist side right now. It's hard to tell because everything looks about the same, but there's a lot less troops in that stack. It's just one counter no matter how you look at it. French laying siege here. Russians had a this can go away. Russians had a bit of a problem attempting to do exploration in the Siberia area. They ended up losing one leader, their better one, and the other one getting repulsed back, lost in the woods or whatever, but found his way back. Turks totally annihilated the Persians. First battle was in Aleppo, and they knocked them down to like 3 strength points. Then they moved up here and got the other. But they lost 2 leaders in the process, so they're behind the game right now in terms of total war score. They got a victory point off of it, but it's really not a big deal. But the biggie is they have freedom to act, so they can slide an army down into Iraq or up into Georgia and be doing a double siege without any real risk here. Anyway, that's about it. Okay, well, that's the end of the second round, and turn continued. Russia's actually in a lot of trouble. They didn't have enough money for another round of payments, so they went ahead. Tuscany charged out and attacked the French down here in Italy, and they were pretty much destroyed. The leader survived, and he withdraws into the fortress just in case. La Rochelle finally fell, and that leads me to an interesting predicament. I gotta look up whether or not French transports moving troops to England can be intercepted by the English. It's kind of a tricky situation. You would think they should be able to. You may have to just say they can, because I don't think the rules specify that. Anyway, that's about it. Turks opened up a siege on Iraq, trying to take what they can from the Persians while they're weak. Okay, let's try this again. Most of the action happened in the English Isles this time. Not too surprising. A little bit of rolling for sieges and everything everywhere else. But in the English Isles, Monk marched into Ulster and was beaten back by the Irish. He has very little left. He actually was temporarily removed, but he came back immediately. Dudley made a march against the siege here, and he was defeated, actually. And now things are open for Rupert and to keep working. It may not even be necessary for the French to land. Risking the French Navy in an action seems a little foolhardy when, hey, maybe the Royalists are going to be able to win this anyway, or at least, gain some ground this turn. I'd rather not risk the French Navy if I can help it. All right, pushing quickly to the end of the round, turn rounds at the end of 5. The Royalists were unable to gain any ground. They laid siege to Birmingham, but they didn't get it. They'll be able to stay there for whatever that's worth. The French took Pisa, but they haven't finished Tuscany off. The Turks took Mosul, but they didn't get Iraq. They do get to stay in Iraq as well, though. All right, well, time to see what kind of pieces can be arranged, especially these pieces between minors. That's mainly, at this point, France and Turkey's goal. No one else is at war, I believe, so that's all we really have to worry about. All right, well, at the end of all of this, France took a level 2 piece, which didn't give them anything more than the province. They actually probably should have taken level 1, but they wanted the victory points. That was their break even. Well, more than break even, because they got 10-6 with the thing, but it made the cost for declaring war less painful. Turkey also took a piece. They managed to get a level 1 piece, which gave them Mosul. And now they're out of their war. And their stability is way up. Their army was not hurt. So they're in a position to move against the Mamluks again. Finally! They're back where they were at the early stages of the game, except their technology is not that much higher. And we see the Muslims are going to be increasing in technology, but they probably will not be bumping above the muskets level. We'll see. It's possible that they might, but I think it's very unlikely. The Russians are holding the door there, and only weird events could trigger that falling down below there. Okay, stability is a big issue. We can see Turkey's gotten all the way back up. Almost everyone's in place except for poor Russia, who didn't lose any points this turn. Speaking of points, very quickly, Netherlands is still in the lead at 5-10. France 476, England down to 449. Well, they're still gaining points. Poor Spain at 94. They're just never going to kick there. Turkey 95. They might be able to gain some because there's a lot of points in the Mamluks. And if they can avoid the Mamluk revolt once they take them over, that'll be actually pretty potent. Plus, they get the money from the Grand Orient, which is not very much anymore. I haven't looked to figure it out because nobody's keeping track of it. But with all these spices and products of the Orient coming in by sea, that's not going to be a big deal. Portugal, Russia still looks like they're in the game at 447, but trust me, they aren't. And they need to own all of this at the end of the game. Those points are kind of factored in the way, say, France is going to be way ahead for the things they own, or Spain's going to be behind for theirs. So those Russian gains are counted in. At the end of the game, you get victory points for everything you own. Britain looks like they're in a little bit of trouble here. The Irish revolt, they're going to have to do something about that, but they still have to worry about the Royalists. They don't want to lose either of those wars, but which one do you lose if you get to choose one? It's hard to tell, because if they lose to the Royalists, they get to keep Ireland if they win there. But if they lose to the Irish, even though they get the advantages that the Parliament has, they don't have a lot of points they need for Ireland. So they're going to have to go to war with the country of Ireland at that point. All right, up it's going.